Hey, Derek, how are you?
Doing
Doing well.
great. Good to
Doing
see you
well.
again.
hmm
I'll let you introduce yourself and take it away.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, hey, everyone. I'm Junte Delane. Let me go ahead and share my screen with you all. Just give me 1 second here while I do that. Awesome. So hopefully you guys are able to see my screen.
Oh, I saw all those images on the desktop. We got to
Hey,
talk
you
about
were, you were supposed to see that. I should have cleaned that up earlier. But great. So you guys obviously are able to see it. Again, Derek, thank you for having me on. Really looking forward to presenting and having this talk with you guys today. I think it's going to be slightly different from some of the other sessions that you guys were used to and that you guys seen today. I really want to talk about, again, how to grow that e-commerce brand, but how to use social media in order to do that and all the different components that are needed, particularly in this time of crisis, right? So I know you guys may have some questions, so on and so forth. So hopefully I can answer some of those through this presentation. So just to let you know a little bit more about myself, again, my name is Junte Delane. I started my marketing career as a DJ, then dipped my toe into the water of establishing an entertainment social network that competed with some other guy on the East Coast who was starting a network for college students that I thought would be a total flop. But obviously that didn't work out. For me, he was more than I thought he would be. $63 billion worth anyway. But I'm obviously talking about Mark Zuckerberg there. I also founded the Digital Branding Institute, which is all things digital branding. It's a great resource for you guys as well. I'm the former senior digital brand manager for USC. And I'm also the founder and chief strategist of Digital Delane. And we are a full service digital agency that helps to launch digital brands. So if you are an e-commerce brand looking for a go-to-market strategy, if you're looking for better brand representation online, brand management, ratings, reviews, so on and so forth, then let's talk. If you're in the mood for a partner in the marketing space, let's have at it. All right. So with that said, let's jump right into our agenda for today. All right, so how do you build a future-proof digital brand? Those are some of the things I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about how to leverage your existing assets and resources without trying to figure out how to scale. What are some best practices that you can use to, deliver upon what you currently have now and amplify that to the masses so that you can begin to grow. I'm going to talk about how to deepen loyalty with your existing customer base in that top 20%. I'm going to talk about how to explore collaboration benefits and different ideas around that. And then I'm also going to give you a specific pandemic marketing strategy, right? I know it's so important because things are a little bit different, right? Especially from an e-commerce perspective today. And then embracing the pivot. We're going to talk about different ways to embrace that pivot so that you guys can begin to grow your brand. All right. So I like a lot of response during my presentation, so feel free to put things in the chat section. I'm going to ask questions. You guys are able to even, take screenshots, take pictures of the device as well. Tag me on it, Junte Delane. I love to be active on social media. So what picture is this? This is the Occupy Wall Street movement. And why am I even adding this in the presentation, right? Because I want to make sure that we identify the different moments of crisis and how brands have interacted with consumers during these crises. And so when it comes to the Occupy Wall Street movement, we all know this was back in 2008 when really customers were fed up on the unethical and shady business practices for the housing and financial industry and just anything corporate they were completely against. And this fundamentally changed the way in which brands were able to communicate. You start to see after this moment brands being more transparent, right? Brands having more personality. You started to see there was no longer a commercial look in terms of the people that you would see on commercials. So this is a moment where that communication completely changed from a brand to consumer perspective. And then you have this, the Me Too movement. This is really where brands were forced to be accountable with associating themselves, hiring people, sponsoring shows and people that are presumably doing deplorable acts, right? And ultimately, this really shed light on the true values of that organization, and consumers were spotlighting those values based upon who that brand was interacting with. And then, of course, we have the Black Lives Matter movement. And now brands are being forced to recognize that Black lives do matter and really take a stance on where they stand when it comes to the issues of systemic racism and so on and so forth, right? And all of this stuff is happening in the midst of the worst pandemic in our lifetime. I mean, we have a lot going on. And brands ultimately are being affected, right? People are closing down their doors, all this stuff. I sound like I'm preaching to the choir right now because I know that you guys understand this. But it's important to also know that this is more than just an economic transformation. It is an economic transformation more so than an economic crisis. And the reason why that is because on the tail end of this thing, there's going to be a difference in the way in which we all communicate with one another, as well as we all communicate with brands. Because now people are forced to focus on digital. And we've gotten an influx of clients based on this premise itself. They have no other way to communicate with their target audience besides the digital platform. And this also is a great opportunity for many e-commerce brands. So in order to really strive during this time, you want to make sure that you're as dynamic as the behavior of your consumers. And what does that mean? Well, it means that even though you may be an e-commerce brand, many of the functions and features are already developed in the back end, right? So that's locked in. You're sort of live and die by the features of your offering. But it's important to understand as consumers' behavior starts to become more dynamic, you want to make sure that you are aligning or extracting the key features that are aligned with those consumer behaviors, and make sure you're framing that and packaging that during this time. So that's an important key when it comes to marketing your features for your offering. So how can you build that future-proof digital brand? Well, there's plenty of ways to do that. And I'm going to talk about that now. So one of the ways is obviously to build a digital brand. And I also want to note that just because you are a brand in the digital space does not mean that you have a robust digital brand. So the Digital Branding Institute defines your digital brand as your identity, your visibility, and your credibility. So when you're thinking about building that future-proof digital brand, you want to make sure that you're checking off all of these boxes, focusing on your identity, not only your website, not only the content or the people that you engage with, but also your visibility in terms of your paid media, in terms of your SEO, and your credibility, ratings and reviews, who are the ambassadors or people of influence that you align yourself with, are all a part of that digital brand specific to an e-commerce brand, okay? Now, when you consider your digital brand and when you consider who you should align yourself with, you want to make sure that you identify those individuals of influence that can help to promote your brand. And why am I saying influence instead of influencer marketing, right? I believe that influencer marketing is starting to plateau, very similar to how traditional advertising starts to plateau because people become numb to all of the advertising and marketing communication. So as an e-commerce brand, when you're trying to grow, you ultimately want to align yourself with those influential people. You may see, for example, you have like Neil Patel or Mari Smith, Jay Baer, things like that, and even Derek as individuals that really can help to amplify the awareness of your e-commerce brand. And so making sure you identify not only people who are influencers that have a whole bunch of brand messages in their news feeds, and really their audience understands that this is a pay to play, especially with those notifications and announcements that are required by the FTC. So if you focus on having operating or building a relationship with that person of influence and having them become an ambassador, that is a great step. to growing your digital brand, especially in this time of crisis, because naturally their network becomes your network. You're able to collaborate on different content types and sponsorships and so on and so forth. So you absolutely must have some type of influence marketing involved in your e-commerce brand communications. All right. So let me break this down a little bit further. And I know this is going to be a lot of information that I'm going to be saying today, but you obviously have a chance to review the recap and the replay for this presentation. If you guys have any questions, feel free to put that in the chat section. Tag me, ping me on social media if you guys have any additional questions as well. So one of the tenets that I talked about earlier was your digital identity. So when it comes to creating your digital identity, I highly recommend that you create more content. If you think you're already creating a lot of content now, you need to create more. Okay, that is very, very important, because nowadays, especially during this pandemic, people are consuming more content than before. So one of the ways that you're able to create more content is not trying to start from scratch. You obviously want to repurpose that content. And oftentimes I think about repurposing as Thanksgiving dinner. You celebrate Thanksgiving. If you eat turkey, then you know what I'm talking about. It's coming up in a couple months, which is really, I don't know how that's going to work during the pandemic. I don't know if people are having Thanksgiving via Zoom or what. I don't know. But bottom line here is you repurpose your content the same way that you would repurpose that turkey dinner, right? You create, turkey sandwiches, turkey casserole, soup, all that stuff, right? These are different ways that you're able to create. So if you were to have a main piece of content, you obviously want to break off micro pieces of content and then use that as a way to help you create more content for your brand. And if you're anything like me, you know that if it's not on the calendar, it just won't happen, right? So you also want to make sure that you're not only creating content, but planning for when that content is going to be published, making sure that all of that is aligned with your social media amplification, is aligned with anything that your person of influence is doing, so on and so forth, because there always should be a strategy around what you are posting. So make sure it's included on that calendar. And of course, I always say that if you are thinking about creating one piece of content at a time, stop. Focus on batching your content, because you would not bake one cookie at a time, right? You would focus on baking a bunch of cookies at one time. So you want to treat your content exactly like that. And this may seem like it's commonplace, but you'd be surprised how many clients I come across who do not have a systemized process for content creation. And the second tenet is visibility, your digital visibility. So right now, it is an absolute great time to do social media ads. Teresa just says, yeah, she's guilty of that. How do you utilize influencer marketing strategy when starting out with a low budget? So those are some questions that I certainly can get into. I'll either get into it at the end, or feel free to contact me on the website or through social media, and I can answer that question for you, Rami. But here's the thing. When it comes to digital visibility, we know that now is a great time to implement a paid social campaign. Why? Because it's a simple fact of supply and demand. Many brands have actually scaled back their ad spend, have canceled their ad spend altogether, so that leaves more inventory out there. And the more inventory there is and less demand, naturally the price is going to decrease significantly. So I highly recommend that you utilize paid social for your e-commerce brand so that you can stay top of mind for when your target audience is ready to take you up on your offering. Okay. The other thing here is that based on this particular survey, we know that the display ads are being canceled or pushed back. Any of the paid social media and also digital video are being put on pause or canceled or pulled altogether based on this particular survey. And so what that means is that there's plenty of opportunity if you have the means to leverage this opportunity. And that means that you can focus on display paid video and digital video, because that is wide open. Also, when you think about streaming services, smartphone use, overall content on the internet, these are opportunities for you to leverage. So that means if you have a YouTube channel, if you're doing any live streaming, or if you're just creating content overall on the internet, continue to do so, because you're going to have more eyeballs based on the fact that more people are consuming content on their devices. Now, the third tenet is credibility. So when I talk about credibility, oftentimes it has to do with your brand voice, in terms of, are you speaking to the pain points, to the challenges of your target audience? And how is that conveyed or presented, and specifically on social media? So before we get into a deep dive on that, I want to talk about the functions of what your brand voice is, because oftentimes a lot of people don't really know exactly what a brand voice is, right? It's very opaque and it's very ambiguous, right? When you talk about brand voice. So these things pretty much break it all down, right? Your character, your purpose, language, and your tone. The character is that human characteristics of your brand voice. The purpose is the ownable point of view of your brand voice. The language are the words, the phrases that you use to describe your offering. If you're a part of a group, you know that they'll call that group, whoever's following that group, a specific name. So that's a part of the language that's involved in your brand voice. Then the tone is, it's not what you say, but how you say it. It's the word, the rhythm, the cadence, so on and so forth, of actually how your text is presented on social media in particular. So those are the different components of your brand voice, okay? Now, one key example that I really like is actually Wendy's. And if you're not familiar, Wendy's went on a roasting spree where they basically roasted everyone that interacted with their brand. No one was safe. Their competitors, anyone that commented, interacted, so on and so forth. And this created a lot of social engagements. And one thing to consider here is that when you're looking at trying to create more personality and so on in your brand voice, you may want to take a page from Wendy's. And in fact, Hamburger Helper did the same thing. They said, PSA, knowing how to mix Hamburger Helper doesn't make you wife material. They responded to this user and said, and this makes you husband material? And then another person chimes in and says, drag him, you sexy ass glove. And another person says, OMG, all these food accounts becoming some clackback champs, and I love it. So what you want to consider here is that you want to go from servitude to attitude, because ultimately it helps, especially when it comes to creating more organic reach on social media. Because the bottom line here is that people on social platforms, they don't want to be helped, but they want to be engaged before anything else. And that's important for you to consider, because when you think about all of the other summits, conferences, so on and so forth that you've attended within the last, let's say, 3 or 4 years, right? When you come across tracks that have to do with social media, many of the sessions had to do with customer service, but you don't really see that anymore. And there's a reason. It's because nowadays consumers want to be engaged. And that has everything to do with your brand voice that you have as an e-commerce brand. So you want to focus on not only utilizing a social channel as a way to handle customer service requests, but you also have to figure out how are you going to be engaging in this process. So Wendy's actually flipped that during the pandemic, and they went from roasting to toasting. And they focused on highlighting things that people were doing within the community and rewarding them with free nuggets, right? So this is a good example, brand voice example of how you're able to create a unique brand voice that the algorithms reward because it's more personal and it's engaging. And then also revamping that by toasting instead of roasting. during this pandemic. So it's still aligned with their brand voice, right? So those are some good cues to take in terms of building that brand voice. But ultimately, you want to be memorable, entertaining, and smart. Be memorable, entertaining, and smart. One of the ways that you're able to be smart is actually put this in the presentation because it's one of my favorite movies. And I really just think it's smart execution across the board, especially if you are a small e-commerce brand and you're looking to leverage some of the things that these larger brands may have. Now, if you're not familiar with Moneyball, it was originally a book starring Brad Pitt. So if you know Brad Pitt, you know most of his movies either range from good to great. I would argue that. And so, it's a pretty good movie. Right. But more importantly, it was about a time when the Oakland A's baseball team utilized data in order to win when they just didn't have very many resources. Now, I'm a little biased because I'm a Bay Area native, grew up an Oakland A's fan, had the opportunity to be a bat boy for a day. When I was in high school, I was probably like maybe, 110 pounds soaking wet there. But it really allowed me to really understand the inner workings of the club, so on and so forth, right? I got that behind the scenes look, and I've been following them ever since. And so what's important to note here is that during this time, they focused on creating a strategy using data and the resources that they currently had. And that strategy allowed them to be first in the AL West. They got 20 wins in a row, and that was the actual record during that time. And if you're a historian, if you follow baseball back then, they obviously did not win the Super Bowl, but the Boston Red Sox actually took the same approach during that year, and they actually were able to win. So why am I even bringing this up, right? Not only is it one of my favorite movies, but it also is a good guide to focus on how you can leverage your internal resources to make sure that you look at the data and you'll be able to leverage that data based on your current competitors and even larger competitors, just like they did when the New York Yankees were, the predominant ball club, right? So it's important to think about these things because naturally, when it comes to building that brand around your e-commerce product, we all know that the elephant in the room is certainly Amazon. And so based on that, we have clients that come to us that had monthly revenues of $300,000 a month. Then they have their Amazon store suspended for whatever reason, and their revenue goes to zero, all because they have not established their own brand. And it's very, very important that you do that. You certainly can be on Amazon, but you also want to make sure that you own the data and that you own that brand from all the touch points that you have representation. Okay, so that's very, very important. So here are some 4 Moneyball style tips. And Derek, let me know how much time I currently have here. Okay. So here.
Okay, it's coming up quick though.
Got it. Okay, so I'm going to wrap it up. All right. I'm going to wrap it up with 4 quick Moneyball style tips. So one thing that you should consider is to develop that pandemic marketing strategy, understanding your current customers versus your potential customers. Who is your customer now? If there are any changes because of the pandemic, you obviously want to revamp that. Where do they live? Not if they're in a house, condo, or apartment, but like where do they live online? Is it Facebook? Is it virtual events? So on and so forth. Talk to them where they actually are, and then rework your successful campaigns. Whether it's if you had a successful print ad, they're now Google ads, right? If you had a successful cold calling campaign, now you obviously want to have cold emails. If you're doing event marketing before, you want to focus on establishing virtual events like the one you're at now. And ultimately, you want to learn and improve. Why? Because you can't do anything else, right? I mean, literally, what else can you do, right? So everything is digital now. So if you had a digital campaign that didn't work, learn and improve, because it's the only option that you have at this particular point. focus on the top 20% of your customers, meaning that if you have longtime customers on an enterprise plan, for example, if they have any financial issues, make sure that you throw them in an olive branch, so to speak, by having them lock their discounted price in for the remainder of the year, things like that, so that can help them stay your customer. Okay. And then explore the benefits of collaboration. We're all in this together. Make sure that you partner with someone to help create, for example, a co-branded ad campaign so you guys can share some of the expenses there. And as long as they're a part of or aligned with your brand, it certainly can be beneficial for both of you. And then lastly, embrace the pivot, right? We also understand that, when life gives you lemons, what do you do? What do you do? You make a mojito, right? That's what you do when life gives you lemons. And so if that's, part of your deal, go ahead and make it happen. Ultimately, you want to adapt your ads, you want to adapt your emails, so on and so forth, so that you make sure that you focus on the pain points of your target audience during this time, right? That could be people who are now moonlighting as parents because of, the pandemic. Could be because, Black Lives Matter movement, as an example, is affecting the process, or excuse me, the thoughts and so on of your target audience. And ultimately go from transactional to educational. So there no longer is any type of transactional engagements. Focus on being educational, because if people either do not have the money to take you up on your offering, you want to make sure that during this time they're well informed and they're educated, and you want to be that resource of education for those individuals, so that when they have that opportunity, now is when you can bring them in as a customer. And be a part of a broader solution. Make sure that you think about aligning your brand with something that has to do with the lives of your target audience. So keys to success, I'll go ahead and skip through this, but we talked about that future-proof brand. We talked about a lot of different things, but ultimately check out the replay. Ask any questions that you have for me via social media and so on, and I'll be sure to answer. And if you're looking to be smart, if you're looking to be efficient, if you're looking to be effective, let's talk about it if you're looking for a partner in the marketing space. So with that said, Derek, I'll go ahead and pass it on to you.
Thank you so much. I love that presentation. I think that people should be certainly thinking a bit more positive towards the future.
Yeah.
Everybody, if you want to check out John Tai, then go to digitaldelane.com. I'm going to put it here again in the chat, and we're going to move right into our closing session. 2 quick notes. I mentioned it at the top, but maybe you weren't here at the beginning. If you're in the United States and you haven't registered to vote, go to vote.org. It takes 2 minutes. You can get it done. Register to vote. Vote. You can vote absentee. You don't have to go in anywhere. It'll be fine. Ignore the media bullshit about that. Anyways, and secondly, we are giving away a PS5. I still can't believe we're giving away a PS5. We're going to be announcing the giveaway winner tomorrow at the end of the day. We did have that question come in chat about influencer marketing. We're not going to answer it because we have 2 sessions on influencer marketing tomorrow that are going to cover that in great detail. And we did have an opening keynote on it earlier today, and those will answer them greatly, as well as I did answer it a little bit in the Q&A section. But with that said, we're going to move into our session with Savannah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.